Hi, my name is Mr. Jeffrey, and I teach choir. I teach choir because I love the sense of community and how you get to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Singing is deeply personal because we don't get to choose our voices, and because of that, choir offers everyone a place to become comfortable with their voice. Every person matters in choir because every person is adding their own voice to the total sound, and each one of those voices makes a difference. So what is choir? Think of it as similar to preparing for your spring program with Mrs. Erickson. We sing songs, rounds, partner songs, and occasionally we sing with instruments too. The 5th grade choir is called Panther Choir, and we rehearse once a week on Tuesdays. Traditionally, we have one evening informants with the band to share what we've been working on in the fall, and then we have one evening concert with the band and orchestra in the spring. Choir is great because everyone has their instrument with them all the time, their voice, and it's free. It's also great because if singing alone frightens you, like it does me, you don't have to. Choir is about singing with the whole group. We have opportunities for kids to solo if they want to, but no one ever has to. If you don't think you're a good singer, that's okay. Join choir anyway. I don't think I have a particularly great voice, but singing in choir has helped me to become a better singer. And I know that you'll become a better singer too. Plus, your voice blends in with the people around you, so you don't ever stick out. Nobody hears you by yourself. One of the best parts about teaching in Pine Island is that Mrs. Hoppy, Mr. Mish, and I all believe it's important for kids to have the opportunity to play an instrument and sing in choir, to do both things. So we've deliberately set up our entire music program from 5th grade all the way through high school so that kids are able to do both, that they're able to participate in band or orchestra and choir. And we heavily encourage them to do that. Those skills we build in each one of those groups helps in the other groups too. It also exposes kids to more musical experiences, and it just helps everybody to develop more as young people and musicians. With that said, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hoppy and Mr. Mish so they can talk about band and orchestra.
Hello, 4th graders. My name is Mr. Mish, and I'm excited today to teach you about the instruments that we have in the orchestra here in Pine Island. I have been the orchestra teacher here for 34 years, and I love working with our orchestra students. And there's 4 instruments that we offer here in Pine Island, and I'm going to go over each of those individually today, show you what they sound like, how we play them, give you a little introduction. And those 4 instruments are the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass, and I'll go through them in order. The first instrument that I'm going to show you is the violin. The violin is probably the most popular instrument in the orchestra, and if you were to choose the violin, most likely that would be the instrument that I would recommend for you, because we have more violins than any other instrument in the orchestra, and in many ways, at least most violinists think it's the most important instrument in the orchestra, because oftentimes they carry the melody. So like all the string instruments, we use the bow to play the violin, and we can also do something that's called arco. And so I'm just going to demonstrate the open strings on the violin. These are where I don't use my fingers at all, going from lowest to highest. And I can also play it pizzicato, which when I just pluck the string. So here's what it sounds like pizzicato. But most often we use the bow and we play arco. The violin is sort of like the soprano of the orchestra. It also has sort of alto qualities. Not that you have to sing, be a soprano or alto to play the violin, but it sort of fills that role like in a choir. It's the upper voices. And so here's what the violin sounds like when I play with my fingers. This is a little tune called Allegro. So there it is. That's the violin. The next instrument I have for you is called the viola. And as you look at it, you go, hey, wait, that's just a bigger violin. And it is kind of just a bigger violin. Here's my violin, here's my viola. They're very similar. They have 3 of the same strings, but where the violin has a higher string, the viola has a lower string. So here's what the viola strings sound like. And the viola can also be played pizzicato too. So you notice the viola has kind of a deeper and richer sound, and it's a little bit bigger instrument. So if you're a little bit bigger person, this could be an instrument for you. But we've also had people start out on the violin and switch to the viola, and so forth. It's a pretty easy switch between the 2 instruments. So here's what the viola sounds like playing that same allegro tune. So there it is, the viola. You can see it's pretty equally nimble to the violin, but it's a little bit more of an alto or a tenor, a little deeper in quality. Now I've moved to the cello. The cello is such a big instrument, you cannot put this one under your chin. So even though it looks a lot like the violin and viola, instead of a chin rest, it's got an end pin that rests on the ground, and you have to play it pretty much sitting down. And so it has lower strings than the viola. So you can really feel those deep vibrations. And we play it pizzicato, and pizzicato actually almost sounds better on these lower strings. There's more ring. But it's a very agile instrument. Even though it's more in the tenor and bass range, it can play the same melodies that you can on the violin and viola. So here's our little allegro tune on the cello. So if you like the lower tones, those deeper sounds, the cello might be one of the instruments that would interest you, the cello. The last string instrument I'm going to show you today is called the double bass. Some people also call it the string bass or the contrabass or just the bass, but we like to call it the double bass. And it's called the double bass because it plays a whole octave below the cellos. So it is really, the bass is the bass of the orchestra. And so here's what their strings sound like. And then pizzicato really rings. So if you like deep sounds in that playing pizzicato, the bass is the instrument for you. But it's also an agile instrument, just like all the others. So here's the double bass playing the same tune that the cello and the viola and the violin did. Notice that I had to do a little bit of moving around on my arm because the notes are so far apart on the bass, we have to do a lot of what's called shifting. Now before we go, I want to show you that on all the string instruments, no matter what you play, they come in different sizes that fit you that sound the same. So this is a regular adult size bass, but next to me here, I also have the size bass. This is a half size bass, or a quarter size bass that you would start on if you were in 5th grade. So the bass can fit you. You don't need to be as tall as an adult to play the bass. So the double bass, big or small, you can play it. All right, one last demonstration before we go. I told you about graduated sizes with a double bass. This is a half-size violin, and here it is next to my full-size violin. And I just want to play you the strings on it so you can hear it sounds the same. As my regular size violin. So no matter your size, big or small, you can really play any instrument in the orchestra. We'll find an instrument that fits you not only for what you like to hear, but also for your size. So thanks for checking out the violin, viola, cello, and bass.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Hoppy, and I will be your band director next year. Normally at this time of the year, we're doing mouthpiece testing with the 4th grade students. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, that's not going to be happening. We're also going to have to make some other changes because of this. We're only going to start 4 instruments next fall with our 5th graders: flute, clarinet, trumpet, and trombone. Now don't worry, that doesn't mean you can't play other instruments. In 2 to 3 months of trying those 4 instruments, some of you will get to move to some of the other instruments. What's really important for us to remember, though, is that we need to have everyone spread out around all the instruments of the band so that we don't just have 1 or 2 instruments. That way we sound the best that we can. Also really important for me is that no instrument has a specific gender for it. It doesn't matter who you are, everyone can play every instrument. Okay, so we're going to start by having the woodwinds demonstrated, and we're going to start with the highest of the woodwind instruments, and that is the flute. So the flute has a hole in the mouthpiece, and we blow the air across the mouthpiece. This is the only instrument that gets blown into that our mouth doesn't go around the hole, or the instrument doesn't go into our mouth. So the air just goes across the mouth plate. And it gets held to the side, and this is how we play. Okay, so we have the woodwind instrument that is called the clarinet. The clarinet uses a reed to make it sound, and when you blow into it, the reed vibrates. So the reed is something that you do need to be very careful with, and you will need to occasionally get new ones when they get broken or worn out. So this one uses lots of fingers, like most of the woodwind instruments do, and so here is how you play it. So now we'll demonstrate the brass instruments. We're going to start with the trumpet. The trumpet is the highest of the brass instruments. Now all of the brass instruments get played by buzzing your lips, and that vibration of your lips is what actually makes the sound. So when I buzz my lips without the mouthpiece, is what it sounds like, and when I do the mouthpiece, now luckily that's not actually what the trumpet sounds like. When we put it together, that's what it's gonna sound like a real trumpet, like this. So this is the trombone. It is the lower one of the two brass instruments that I'm demonstrating for you today. It's very unique in that it uses a slide to get played instead of your fingers. So it's the only instrument in the band that does that, and it actually, because of that, makes it a little more like a string instrument. A trombone is a really good instrument for someone who's a good singer because you have to have good ears when you're playing. Now, some students think that because it doesn't have any buttons that it would be really, really hard to play. But that's what I'm here for. I teach you how to do it, and it's really not that hard. And some students think that they can't play it because their arms aren't going to be long enough. But your arms aren't going to stay the same length for the rest of your life. Most of you are going to have longer arms, so it's going to be just fine. So this instrument gets played like the trumpet in that I'm going to buzz my lips, and then instead of using fingers, I'll use my slide to play. There's a possibility that some of you may switch to the saxophone. In 5th grade, we have 2 different saxophones that we use. One is smaller, the alto sax, and one is larger, the tenor sax. The tenor sax plays low notes, while the alto sax plays some of the higher notes. Now, there's an important thing to remember. Most bands don't have very many saxophone players in them. So we will not be able to allow very many of you to make that switch. After we get started, there's a possibility that some of you might move to other brass instruments, and there's 3 other ones that we could have you move to. The first is the horn. Sometimes it's called the French horn, And this is the French horn. It is the next highest to the trumpet. One that plays the same notes as the trombone, but looks different, is called the euphonium. Your parents might know it as the baritone. And then the euphonium times 2 is the tuba. And the tuba we only usually have one of in our band. Percussion instruments are the only instruments in the band that don't use air to get played. In 5th grade, we use the xylophone a lot and the snare drum. But we also have many other instruments to learn as well. And that's why we ask that you have 2 years of piano lessons in order to be a percussionist. So those are the band instruments that 5th graders can play. But remember, we're only starting with 4 this year: flute, clarinet, trumpet, and trombone, with the possible option to change later. Mr. Jeffrey, Mr. Mish, and I are excited to see what you're going to be interested in. We're hoping that you'll consider playing an instrument and singing with us. Fill out a Google form so that we can start to make plans. Hey everyone, breaking news. We have decided that saxophone is an option for starting the next school year. So alto sax and tenor sax are now a choice if you want to start those in the fall. So if you want to be in band, flute, clarinet, saxophone, both alto and tenor, trumpet and trombone are your options. Of course, you are always still welcome to join orchestra, and we encourage all of our 5th graders to also be in choir. Happy picking!